Hi, and welcome to the Eczema Podcast, where you'll learn tips, products, and natural eczema remedies from Abby, registered holistic nutritionist and founder of PrimePhysiqueNutrition.com. Here's your host of the Eczema Podcast, Abby.
Before we begin, be sure to check out my site to learn more about my ebooks, Healing Eczema, Why Dieting is Not Enough, and my detailed eczema healing treatment plan. So hi guys, welcome to the Eczema Podcast. Today I am here with a very special guest. I am here with Dr. Stephen Wang, who's the director of the Dermatologic Surgery and Dermatology at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And the amazing thing about his cancer center is that it's always been ranked the top 1 or 2 cancer center in the United States. And Dr. Stephen Wang is the director of his dermatology unit, and he's written 4 books and over 85 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. He's also lectured extensively in the United States and around the world, and he serves as the chair of the Photobiology Committee for the Skin Cancer Foundation. He's an active board member on the Photomedicine Society, and he has an active research program. Now, over the last 4 years, Dr. Wang has worked with his father, who's also a practicing acupuncturist in New York City. Together, they formulated a natural herbal healing ointment for people with eczema. And we will be talking more about this later, but I just want to introduce Dr. Stephen to the show. It's such a privilege to have you, so thank you so much for coming on today.
No, thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great. You have so much experience, and you've worked as a dermatologist for over 10 years. So you have a wealth of experience, and I'm excited that you can be on the show and just share your knowledge with all of us who are just yearning to learn more about eczema and treatments that can help it as well. So why don't we just jump right into it, and maybe you can start by telling us some of the most fascinating research that you've found so far in eczema.
I mean, obviously, eczema is a very, very complicated disease. It's a multifactorial, and some of the current thinking is focused both on immune-based as well as the barrier. And I think there's 2 school of thoughts. For a while, people thought that it's the barrier repair. You need to have a good barrier repair, and the stratum corneum, actually the most outer surface of the skin, provides excellent barrier to keep the skin, keep our cells from reacting to bacteria, fungus, yeast, as well as allergens, right? But at the same time, this barrier also regulates temperature, regulates moisture, and regulates the pH of the skin. So it's a very, very important. And in patients with eczema, and there's either genetic issues with the barrier, so that the barrier is impaired. So that's one school of thought. Another school of thought is it's really an immune-based. So it's, an immune system is super active or overactive. It reacts to some sort of allergens, and to people who have a normal immune system that will not have that kind of strong reactions. But I think it's probably the combination of both. And I think that's why when we're treating people with eczema, you really sort of have to think about comprehensive holistic approach of looking at the patient, right? And not only looking at their skin, their genetic background, but you also have to understand their home, right? And the stress level and work environment. So you have to look at everything.
Oh, that's actually really great, because I know a lot of dermatologists don't really look at things from a holistic point of view. So it's great. You're one of the few dermatologists I've met that actually really recognize that you have to take into account everything from a holistic point of view.
No, thank you. And I think this I always had this concept. You have to look at the patient as a whole, right? You're not looking at an individual disease, specific symptoms, but you want to address the root of the problem. sometimes we never know the root of the issues. And eczema is one of the examples. We don't really know the root of the problem sometimes. We're doing a lot of research. But I think also, my outlook is influenced by my father, who is a acupuncturist and herbalist, has been practicing for more than 40 years in New York City. So, we've been talking about medicine, talking about health for decades now. And so his insight and looking at how does Eastern tradition to treat patients can really have a profound impact how I look at my patient, how I treat my patient.
So then, can you give us an overall idea of how you would generally treat an eczema patient? For example, do you use steroids? Do you use herbs or even acupuncture? Since I know you have a good influence of Eastern and Western medicine.
Yeah, so one thing is I like to emphasize that I'm a dermatologist. We see all kind of dermatological conditions, but my focus is mainly on cancer, skin cancer. I'm also a surgeon dealing with skin cancer. But in my view, obviously eczema has different range of severities, right? You have mild cases to extremely severe cases. And I think that using the combination of East and West, sort of fusing that same holistic treatment is very effective. For instance, I think if you just come into a regular dermatologist office and they will examine you and they will easily diagnose if a child or a person have eczema, and naturally the physician will write a prescription for, let's say, a steroid cream of different strength, either a lotion or cream or ointment, right? The doctor was given the instruction, but they also will perhaps give you a sheet of paper talking about some of the skincare regimen and what you have to do. And that's it, right? But if you sort of turn into the Eastern traditions and some of the naturopathic doctor's office and the doctor acupuncturist office, they cannot usually prescribe steroid cream, but they spend a lot of time in looking at and asking you questions about what is your day-to-day routine, what's your stress level, are you getting enough sleep, what is your skincare regimen, how do you wash your face, how do you take a bath, what kind of detergent do you use, what kind of soap do you use, and so they basically try to get all that in pieces of information in place, right? I think we need both. I think it would be great to sort of fuse that concept together, right? So what I like to do is try to get those informations about individuals' lifestyle, because there's a lot of things a person can do to reduce the frequency of the flare, reduce the severity of flare, right? So for instance, in the winter time, we see that a lot, that we have patient comes in, they have eczema flare. The reason for it is the ambient environment, their moisture content in the household is really low because they crank up the heat, and now all of a sudden the moisturization content in the household just drops. And also because it's cold and they sit right next to the radiator, try to warm up. So that heat and also dries up the stratum corneum and sort of strips away a lot of the natural lipids in the skin. And all those problems have to be addressed, right? It's not enough just simply write someone a steroid cream, but you have to educate them about using a humidifier and try to turn down the heat as much as you can and avoid taking really, really hot shower, and don't take a very excessively long shower. Restrict the shower to maybe 5-10 minutes. It's 5 minutes, that's it. And when they come out of the shower, and this is when the skincare regimen that can really kick in, right? So a lot of times people make mistake of their skin is, so they spend, let's say, 10-15 minutes in the hot shower, they feel great, they feel relaxed. But at that time, the skin, the heat, and basically will strip away a lot of the natural lipids and cholesterol and ceramides. All those things are needed to build the barriers. And then what they do next is they take a towel and they just scrub themselves and rubbing it. But that action helped them to reduce the itch. But that doesn't help either, because now you create mechanical trauma, mechanical frictions that further erodes the protective barrier. Okay, So those are the challenges. So what I tell my patient and what we try to do Dr. Wang Herbal Skincare blog post is educate people about what not to do and what to do. So for instance, when you get a shower, as I mentioned before, no hot shower, reduce the duration of the shower, and also just pat yourself dry and don't scrub, don't rub, just pat it down. So you still have a lot of moisture inside on the skin. And then the next important thing is that's when you put the medication on, that's when you put a good moisturizer on. So simple things like that, and it can make a huge difference in a patient's life. The challenge also about eczema is this is a chronic condition, right? This is not a condition that, like skin cancer, let's say, I found someone who have a skin cancer on their face, I perform Mohs surgery, I remove it, the cancer is gone. But in eczema, the problem is, let's say next season, there's a seasonal change. It becomes a lot warmer and you start to sweat. You have an exam, you're not sleeping well because your child is waking up in the middle of the night, or your child is waking up in the middle of the night and he is not sleeping well. And when you're not sleeping well, your digestive tract is not working properly, right? And there's also this gut connections, the gut and the immune system connections. So you have all those infinite triggers that will lead to subsequent flares. And it really requires a eczema patient to sort of be mindful of what his day-to-day action is and to keep a really, really good skincare regimen.
So what are your thoughts on, I know you've done a lot of research on herbs as well. So what are your findings and research on how herbs can help eczema?
Yeah, this is so the herbal research, we started doing this work about almost 4 years ago now. It was my father, and what we did was we actually looked through a lot of literatures, medical literatures, and mostly from Asia, and looking at how in Asia what herbs they were using, and both oral and topical, to treat people with eczema. Right? And then at the same time, what we find is that we create this meta-analysis, we create a database of herbs, a lot of herbs, and looking at the data to see, how good are those data. And then what we did was we backtrack and look at, what exactly are in those herbs. And then we sort of look into the chemical composition and look at some of those the various components of herbs. And to make the long story short, what we found was there are many herbs that have antibacterial, anti-inflammatory properties. And because a lot of those herbs have a rich flavonoids, rich antioxidants, and that can be very useful to control inflammation. And I think so. I've done a lot of work with antioxidants in the past, mainly looking at the combination of vitamin C, E, and a resveratrol, other type of for photo protection, for photo aging purposes. But then the concept is also very similar. That is, all those. Antioxidant is actually very interesting because people sometimes think that you just need one antioxidant and like a magic bullet that will treat the problems. But that's not true. For antioxidants to work really well, you need them to work in concert, in a well-orchestrated manner. So it's almost like a soloist versus a full orchestra. In fact, there are some vitamins, if you give too much of it, like vitamin A, if you give too much of vitamin A, it's actually very detrimental, all right? So what's a classic example of vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin. And it neutralizes all the free radicals that's coming from in the water-soluble phase of the body. And whereas vitamin E is a lipid-soluble, so that it basically holds on the membrane of the cell, which is filled with lipid. They actually need both to sort of interact, work in conjunction, that actually increase the synergy of antioxidant potentials, that actually increase efficacy of that antioxidant cocktail to basically neutralize the free radicals. So now, what does all this have to do with herbs and eczema, right? And I think what's interesting to me is that we, in our research, what we did, we chosen 8 herbs, and within the 8 herbs, there is such a rich mixture of like compounds. We don't understand exactly how they interact with each other, right? So I think the difference in Western medicine is you extract out a single molecule, that you refine it, you purify it, and you take that one molecule and you treat the patient, right? But whereas the Eastern philosophy is, because we don't know what is the best molecule, and you also, I think what's happening, you need a cocktail of those molecules to work more effectively. So that was the path we've chosen, right? And so when we created our product in formulating eczema ointment, we sort of stepped back and tried to understand, what the Chinese philosophy, Asian philosophy, thinking about eczema. And it's a lot of it. I'm having difficulty to fully comprehend the meaning. For instance, it's the fire, it's the heat, all right, and you're dampening the heat, dampening the fire that to reduce the eczema flare. So I don't really understand exactly what that means, like fire in the liver, etc. I don't think that's a very satisfactory answer. And likewise, I don't think it's a very satisfactory answer for us to say it's a immune-based driven process, right? That's not the root, and that's why we're still doing the research. And so what we did was we sort of stepped back and thought about, what is the fundamental issue with eczema from a Western perspective, at least where I can wrap my hands and try to understand it. As I explained to you in the very beginning, that one is the barrier function, right? You got a barrier problem. Second is you have a inflammatory conditions and underlying immune system driving the process. And to make matters worse, sometimes you have bacteria infection, and sometimes you have itch that people start to scratch, right? So what we did was we basically chosen the 8 herbs that have anti-inflammatory, antibacterial properties, and then used natural wax like beeswax, shea butter, and a special mineral, clay mineral called hectorite, which comprised of a lot of rich minerals in there as a barrier function, right? So we thought, to treat this, it's almost like rational design and try to figure out how to tackle this problem. And so it worked really, really well. But what we didn't expect was we got really lucky or a cocktail in this final formulation we put together was actually able to stop itching. And that was a big surprise.
Like in your clinical studies that you did, you found that it stopped
Yeah,
itching?
yeah. No. So it was actually very interesting because when you do an experiment, when you do things, you have a hypothesis, right? You think this is why this is happening. You do this and you try to see a result. What we did was, we had a pretty high confidence in thinking that our eczema ointment, this formulation we created, can actually help people with eczema flare and rebuild their skin, everything else, and heal their skin. And not heal, but like you can't say heal, but it's a good moisturizer to help them to get recovered, right? And what was surprising was when we asked people, how do they like it? And a lot of those people who used the stuff in the beginning keep telling us it stops itching, it stops itching,
Oh.
it stops, right? And we didn't really believe them because when we looked in the herbs, when we looked at our formulation, we didn't really see anything we had in there that had anti-itching properties. So when people keep telling you all of this, and then you start paying more attention, right? And that's why it's good to be a clinician and researchers, because your patients are telling you things. But what was most striking was I had a colleague who had a really bad bee stings on the hand, and over the weekend, and her hand just blew up. It was really itchy. We were seeing patients together, and she was just itching and miserable. And so I offered her some of the ointment. And initially, she was like, "Nah, I don't need your stuff," because she's like, "I don't know what you have in it, but I don't want it." But what's funny was 10, 15 minutes later, she came back to my office because at that point she was just so miserable. She was like, "Okay, just let me try it." So she did, and she put it on, and we were also talking about another patient, just how to manage another patient. So, we're sharing like what's going on. By the time we finished discussing another patient, she was about to leave the room, and she turned to me. She goes, "You know what? My hand stopped itching."
Wow, that's good.
so that was like almost the critical observation we made. And so we realized because people telling you things, you don't believe it as much until you see it for your own eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we started a small little study looking at people with eczema, psoriasis, even mosquito bug bites, and we measured how effective that was.
Do you actually have your product on hand right now that you can show on the video?
Sure. So this is I don't know if it will show
Yeah,
through.
we can see it. For
Yeah,
people who are watching the video, yeah, they'll
yes,
be able to see.
this is our little box and the brand and product, and, so it's been a quite interesting journey, I would say. We did all this research and largely because we started launching the company and start selling the product actually in January of this year, early January, and mainly because we were initially going to just write a paper and be done with it, but a lot of our patients keep asking us where to buy it, so that's how we sort of got our hand into the company.
So, Dr. Wang, do you think that your product with the combination of herbs to stop itching can possibly be more effective than using steroids on the skin? Because from personal experience, I found that steroids haven't been too useful, at least for myself. I know when I used it, I didn't find any benefit, and I didn't really find that it helped my skin heal.
Yeah, I think you asked the really good questions. Obviously, I don't know the full answers without doing a head-to-head test, right? And I think the only way you know this, I think that's something that we are planning on to do. That is, if you find an individual with eczema and that have, let's say, on both sides of the arms, they all have itchy rash, and you ask the patient, how itchy is it on the left side versus the right side, and then we put a steroid cream on the left side, steroid or cream or ointment on the right side, and ask them, and just get them to simply score an itching skill. Now, but I can share with you. I think our product was actually people who use the ointment. A lot of them actually on the website actually come back and tell us on the review that it really helped with itching almost instantaneously, almost right.
Wow.
And so that's a good observation that we made. And so we know a small sample of clinical study that we did, we saw that, and also in real life setting, and we getting feedback from people, right? So that's good. Now, I I use steroid for other conditions and for eczema in the past. I don't think steroid is very effective in stopping itching right away, and here's the reason why, right? Itch is also a very complicated a neurological nerve system, and they have requires different fibers on the nerve that basically you have a focal area that flares up and that sends a signal. The afferent fiber sends a signal back to your spinal cord, eventually feeds into your brain cortex, and then sends back, etc. That's a very it's a very complicated kind of a physiological system, and steroid actually doesn't work that fast. In order for steroid works, it's the molecule actually have to get into the skin, right? And then have to get into the cell, pass through the cell membrane, get into the cytosol, which is the cell, and then you have to finally get into the nucleus of the cells to shut down the entire inflammatory pathway, okay? So that process for but mind you, and the way steroid also works is you have to bind to a certain nucleus, the gene transcription, and so it takes a couple of weeks. It takes 2-3 weeks for the steroid action to sort of
Wow. So you're supposed to use it for 2 to 3 weeks before you see results.
yeah. So that's why when people using steroid cream and steroid lotion, etc., if you put it on in one day for an eczema, you don't see any results,
Okay.
right? You don't see anything, and you gotta use it for a period of time because that's when you give the medicine enough chance to work, right? Because you have to shut down and stop the inflammatory transcription factor, and the nucleus sort of sends off. So the DNA in the nucleus uh, transcribe into mRNA, the messenger RNA. mRNA basically transcribe into protein. Protein basically start having an effect on the bodies, right? And the peptides, etc., causes inflammatory reaction. So the steroid doesn't block those peptides. You have to actually go all the way down to the nucleus and shut down that entire production pathway. So that's why it takes 2-3 weeks for it works. So for that reason, that's why I think I agree with you that you say you put steroid on and you don't see the itch right away for 2-3 weeks, and so that is a physiological reason, a pharmacological reason why steroid doesn't work as fast, right?
And
So
I always thought you shouldn't use steroids for a long time, like more than a couple of weeks.
yeah, I think here's actually a very very interesting discussion about how do we use steroid, right? And steroid is a very common prescription for treating a lot of skin conditions, ranging from eczema, psoriasis, like to poison ivy, right? And a lot of those conditions. And when used correctly, when used in the right appropriate amount of time, it is needed. And because there are sometimes you just need those things to shut it down, okay? But at the same time, I think there are a lot of patients, especially moms, and who don't want to use steroids for a long period of time on their kids, right? And for one reason or another. And I think that's where we are getting the feedbacks from, because this product is not a treatment for eczema, right? And but this is a really good moisturizer that happen to have all those great properties, and that's designed specifically for people with eczema. And a lot of the folks and mothers who, and even people who have eczema, they brought our product. What they found is, one, it helps them to sort of reduce the itch, so they don't have to scratch, they don't have itch, and so they provide that sense of comfort. And I think we can come back to the itch. I think itch is like a big problem with eczema, and it's also you create this natural barrier, and you sort of allow the skin to sort of heal from inside out, right? And I think that's all very very important.
Well, what are your thoughts on topical steroid withdrawal?
Yeah, honestly, I have been learning about this over the last 9 months or so. What is really interesting was I did not know about this entity until about 9 months ago. It was actually very interesting because one of the customer who bought our product and wrote to us and told us that they have eczema, topical steroid withdrawal syndrome. And prior to that, I did not know this problem. So I got connected with the International Topical Steroid Withdrawal, the network, and I spoke to Joey Van Dyke, who's the chair and the president, and a lot of other members. And then also had a chance to just go onto the website and look at their posting, look at their history, look at the pictures, look at all the issues. It was quite of a learning experience, and it gave me far more respect and to think about how should we prescribe steroid and what should we talk to the patient. Because I think when you look at, I think we first of all we do not know the prevalence of this disease, meaning how common is topical steroid withdrawal, right? The reason why I say this is because you have tons and tons of dermatologists and physicians constantly prescribing steroid over decades for thousands and hundred thousands of patients over a long period of time. And the only thing we've been taught in medical school residency and everything is chronic use of steroid can cause thinning of the skin, right? And can causes, flushing of the blood vessels on the face. And some people have steroid allergy. Those are the known side effects, right? But when you start reading about the folks on the topical steroid withdrawal group, and they have hair loss, they have cataract, they have osteoporosis, they have swelling of the lymph node, they have shedding of the skin, their skin completely just breaks open. It is a serious problem, right? And the problem is, I think one may not be able to recognize it, two is because I think this disease may not be as common. So as a result, physicians don't see it, right? And as individual physician, let's say, see 5,000 patients in a year, and if you have, let's say, let's just make up some number, the incidence of the disease is like 1 out of 100,000 or something like that. So that patient may not come to the doctor's office. So that doctor who's prescribing for steroid for a long time may not recognize it or may not see it, right? And that's the power of internet because you have support groups and they all talk to each other. And all of a sudden now you got this group of people have similar symptoms, similar presentations, similar issues. And now I think for dermatologists, for us, and for researchers, and now we can look at them and say, okay, now what exactly is going on? We need to pay more attention to it. We need to understand it better. And I think this is the beginning phase, right? And I think a lot more work is needed. But at the same time, I want to step back also to say that we also have to be very responsible about how to think about steroid because steroid is very, very effective for a lot of patients, for a lot of conditions, okay? And at the same time, we know that it has potential side effects. We have to balance that. And every drug, every medications have that risk profiles, and we have to recognize that. So that's also very important. You can't just sort of say we have to ban steroid because if you do that, a lot of patients will suffer, and they will take away a very effective tool for us to treat a lot of skin conditions.
I know you're a good friend of Dr. Peter Leo, who I interviewed in another podcast, and he had a very similar outlook and approach as well. Do you have any words for what patients who are going through topical steroid withdrawal can do, or even, what they can, because I know that a lot of dermatologists are still not on board with it, and that can be very frustrating as well.
Yeah, I think first thing, join the ITSAN group, and it's itsan.org, right? And they have some great, great um, members and who have gone through the process, who have recovered, who are in the process of recovering. They're very nurturing. They're very supportive of each other, and they provide enormous amount of great resources. Okay, so first thing to do is join that group and seek help because what happened is that I understand exactly what you're saying because it can be frustrating, right? As a patient who is suffering from this problem, and a lot of them maybe present initially with just red rash all over the whole body. They're itching, they're miserable, they can't sleep, they're scratching, their skin is falling off, and they're exhausted, right? And because either because the immune system has gone awry, or they're not getting enough sleep, they're not getting enough food, they're overstressed. All of those compounding problems adding it together and making people feel they're alone, right? And sometimes it causes enormous amount of strain in the family as well, right? And you try to find help, you try to seek help, and a lot of healthcare professionals, one, they don't understand, they don't see it, and so no one is able to give you the best course of action how to go about this, right? And you also feel alone. So that's why I think joining that group and it's just the mere fact hearing that you're not alone and you have a supportive group of people, and also it's very encouraging to see people who have gone through that process and come out of the other end and fully recovered. That's also very inspiring. Right? So that's number one. Number two is I think it's difficult, but I think you have to work with your physicians, right? And you have to somehow educate the physicians about this entity, right? You have to do so in a respectable manner, of course. And there is a really good paper that's published in JAD that's by the sponsored by, I think, the National Eczema Association. And Peter was actually one of the co-authors on that paper. And I highly recommend, get that paper, print it out, even just bring it to the doctor's office and say, hey, can you entertain the possibility whether or not I have this problem, right?
What is the paper about? Is it topical steroid withdrawal?
Yeah, I actually have to look it up, but we actually have it on our blog post that a
Okay.
link for people to download that
May-
article.
maybe you can send it to me and I'll include it in the blog post so people can download it.
We'll do. We'll do. I can send you exactly that. We actually wrote a blog post about exactly how do you have the dialogue with doctors, and I think we created that link for people to download that paper, I think.
Okay, that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
And
go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Oh, I know we're running out of time, but I was wondering if you have any last words of advice for people suffering from eczema and things that they can do about it.
Yeah, I think I think there's a few thoughts I have. One is obviously eczema is a chronic condition with wide range of severity, right? And there are people who have just mild type dry skin, and I think that can be readily controlled with a good skincare regimen, occasional use of topical steroids or protopics, allergenics, etc. Right? But I have to emphasize it's how do you go about your life and the day-to-day life. That's very, very important. Pay attention to what are you doing, what are the stress factors, are you getting enough sleep, water intake, what kind of diet are you having. Those are the type of things. It's very, very important because this is a chronic condition, number one. Now, on the other end of it, for people with extreme conditions, steroids are not helping, skincare regimens not helping. You tried all kinds of food avoidance, and you tested yourself with all kinds of allergy tests. It's not helping, right? Help is on the way, right? And we are on an era of incredible discovery where we have some of the great new biological medications to treat people with eczema. And I think hopefully a lot of the eczema sufferers will find great relief from those medications, right? And I think also just folks like yourself and who have suffered from eczema, and I think it's wonderful how you guys also do group together and educating each other, right? And as a physician, that we have a knowledge on the medical aspect, but we have not suffered through the whole process. We write about it, we research about it, but it's really powerful to see folks like yourself who have gone through the process, who have actual live experience of how to deal with this and sharing with everybody else. That is very, very powerful. And also look at some of our contents from our website and what we try to do to educate people, and also look at your website, look at National Eczema Association's website, and learn as much about this disease as possible, and don't give up, don't get discouraged. I think it's a manageable condition. Just requires some patience and persistence, unfortunately.
Thanks for your last words. That's very helpful for sure. And I just want to emphasize to our uh, people who are listening again that you do have a product out, and it's an herbal product that you formulated and that you talked about in this episode. So if people are interested in purchasing this product, where can they get it?
They can just simply search, like, it's on our website, Dr. Wang Skincare, and it's actually, my last name is pronounced Wang, but it's spelled Wang, W-A-N-G, so it's D-R-W-A-N-G skincare.com.
Okay, and I'll include a link in the description as well, so then you can easily search for it. And I think there's a promo code as well that we'll include for people who are purchasing it. So thank you so much, Dr. Wang, for coming on the show. It was great to have you, and I'm sure people learned a lot. And if people want to get in contact with you, should they go on that same website?
Yeah, they can. It's the same website exactly. There's an email on there. So it's info at Dr. Wang Skincare. Unfortunately, we cannot provide any medical diagnosis, etc. We just provide education on our website. And that's the only caveat. And I will be sure to send you that link for that specific article published in JAD and talking about topical steroid withdrawal syndrome.
Okay, that would be great. And thank you so much again for coming on the show. It was wonderful to have you, and I'm sure that we all learned a lot. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Eczema Podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass it along to your friends and colleagues. Visit primephysiquenutrition.com for more articles and tips. Thanks for listening.